Hello and welcome to the President's Podcast right here on the record with the Ohio Senate. The views the news excludes. I'm John Fortney, the Director of Communication with the Senate Republican Caucus, the Majority Caucus in the Ohio Senate. Great to have, for his first time on the program, State Senator Kyle Koehler, a Republican from the 10th District, and that's Springfield, Ohio.
Springfield, basically Clark, Greene, and Clinton counties. So Springfield, Xenia, Beaver Creek, and then Wilmington area.
You know, one of the interesting things, you chair the Workforce Development Committee, correct?
Yes.
You have quite the background in computer programming, software engineering, and manufacturing.
Right.
You're the perfect person for workforce development. Where do we stand right now in workforce development to retain but yet attract new talent to the state?
Right. Well, the big thing is making sure we have individuals who are in school, because I'm also on the Education Committee and Higher Ed, and I spent 8 years in the Ohio House on education. And the big thing is making sure we have individuals who are graduating from high school that are in some way, shape, or form ready to either go into the workforce, prepared to learn about things for the workforce, or go off to college. So again, all those things working together, we need to make sure we have basically high school kids who are ready to enter the workforce in some way, shape, or form.
What interested you in software engineering and then also manufacturing? We'll talk a little bit about where your expertise lies,
Right.
but I mean, that's a 1-2 knockout kind of punch in the state of Ohio.
Well, I laugh about that sometimes. I talk about folks when they want to know who I am. I grew up working in a machine shop. My father put a machine in front of my older brothers when they were leaving high school, and 53 years ago now, I started sweeping floors and cleaning out things as a 13-year-old really, but ended up going through high school and working in a manufacturing facility. And I thought that just like my brothers who have never been to college, I thought I would join them there. But I got to the point of being in high school back in 1980 when there were no computers, no personal computers, but a math teacher said, hey, we're going to do a programming class. It's all on paper. And I was
it that the old punch card?
No. Well, that's how I entered college. But at the time, it was literally on notebook paper. You know, write this program to do this, and then you give it to the teacher, and he would correct it. And I can remember the first time we had a test, and all the smart kids that can know the body parts and memorize the periodic table, they all got back their test, and they're like, I flunked. And I'm sitting there as a B student going, oh my God, I aced this test. And I realized that working in a machine shop all through high school as a senior, not planning on going to college, I'm sitting there realizing in a tool shop, you're doing things in a methodical manner. You're getting this block of steel, you're measuring it, you're cutting it off, you're squaring it up. If something goes wrong, what do? You do this, then this, or repeat this. That's all programming. And sure enough, 5 months later, I'm at Wright State University getting a degree in computer science. So I hit the jackpot. You mentioned IBM punch cards. I started taking classes when we were using IBM punch cards.
Yeah, we were MS-DOS, the old and floppy disks.
Right.
And then to watch how that all changed and developed over the years to where we are now, where your phone has more computing power than what we did 30 years ago.
I left as I was graduating my senior year. I walked by a room and somebody pointed it and we looked in and we said, what are those? And they said, those are personal computers. And at that point, it was like that was the change of how things were happening. But again, I spent 7 years working for government contractors, doing programming for the Air Force and the Navy. And so again, I always joke, my father didn't want me to go to college. He thought college was for playing around. And but 7 years after working for government contractors, he won, and I went back to our family business and helped them automate everything in our shop.
Well, a lot of people don't have an appreciation, and I really didn't either until I started working in a machine shop when I was in college for my uncle. And it started with a big piece of steel. And whether it was 4 inches wide or 6 inches wide in diameter, you cut off what was called a die blank, and then you gave it a perfectly flat face with a surface grinder, and then I would hand that die blank, that die, to him, and he would cut it out by hand. And when I say cut out, it was like a blueprint. It was a pattern that you would put on the end of an extruder, and it would run molten plastic through that extruder. And that would turn into all the things that we take for granted today, from refrigerator gaskets to car window seals to you name it. But it's those things where you can become a multimillionaire quickly if you have the skill set to do it.
Right, right. And even as a high school student, I'm leaving high school designing dies for Whirlpool Corporation to make the stirrer that it's underneath the plastic in the old style microwaves that stirred the microwaves as they were radiated out of the machine. But again, I left high school with the knowledge of how machines work, but the computerization of those over the last 30 years has been totally different.
Yeah, now it's all EDM.
Right. Right.
And that stands for what?
Electro discharge machine, which could mean a number of things. We use it at our shop with an EDM wire machine, which basically takes a thin copper wire and can cut extremely hard steel. Now it takes a while, but it goes through the steel and cuts it, so we can cut very sharp, very precise corners. So again, wire EDM is what we use, but there's other kinds that actually embedding a piece of steel into another piece of steel and eroding stuff away.
So if a young person in high school was thinking about, well, what's my next step? Do I go to community college? Do I get a certificate? Do I major in what, industrial technology for a 4-year degree? What path do you think would be a good way to go in the state as we continue to build on our technology sector?
We have some incredible career technical centers in the state of Ohio, some of the best. We have been hiring ever since the COVID virus, when individuals were told they don't have to come to work anymore, but we're still working because we're critical. We found that high school students who didn't have to be in class, who were old enough to work in a machine shop, came in and started working for us. And right now we have 3 or 4 folks who came to us during COVID, have graduated. Well, one individual just started for us. He wants to play soccer. He's a senior at CTC in Springfield. He's got all of his credits to graduate, but he just needs to take enough classes so he can still play soccer. He's coming to work for us full time. And those kind of individuals who have been trained to work in a machine shop, and again, a lot of it is, do I care what goes in and out of that machine? Will I show up every day? Will I work hard? Do I understand that I can't be on my phone all day long? Just those critical work skills, those soft skills, those are the individuals that can come and work in a machine shop with as little as a degree from a local career tech center.
Yeah, results matter, and you want people that show up, that take pride in their work. And we had Senator Chavez on last week on the program talking about, well, Senate Bill 2, the reemergence of oil and gas and natural gas as clean energy, and the reliability, affordability, and quite frankly, accountability of that industry to really help power the grid, make it affordable, and we're sitting on top of those reserves in Southeast Ohio. If you're a welder, if you're a certified welder in Southeast Ohio, you can be 19, 20 years old making well into the 6 figures.
There's a young lady that I let her ride some of my horses, and she is getting a degree in welding. She is going to graduate and be ready to go to work. I've had an individual, I was working at a county fair, talking to folks, and I had a young lady walk up to me, and she's just smiling in front of my booth, and I'm like, "Hi, how you doing?" She goes, "I'm the girl," and I'm like, "I don't know who you are." And her mother's with her, and I'm like, "I don't know who this is." But I had been talking about her traveling around because she got a degree from the local career tech center in CAD. She was using SolidWorks, which is the same software I use to design in our business. But she's standing there, and I knew I had talked about her because she graduated from high school, went to work making $40,000 a year at a local steel company, designing templates of stuff that they burn out with a torch. And she's like, "Yeah, I'm the guy, I'm the girl," because she was excited to hear that I was telling the story of her going to a CTC, leaving high school and making $40,000 a year right away.
Yeah, I mean, it doesn't matter where you grew up. I grew up in Appalachia, was not wealthy whatsoever, but if you have the ambition, the drive, regardless of where you're from in Ohio or even outside Ohio, come to Ohio, there's work for you.
Right, and it is that work ethic that we have to instill in kids. I remember seeing my dad get up every morning at 6 a.m. and leaving work to clock in at 7, work until 5:30, 5 hours on Saturday. That's the way we were taught a long time ago. We don't do that as much now, but we need to instill that in our young people and folks that are coming out of high school, that, you know what, if you work hard, you don't have to have a degree. You can, that helps in some sense, but we've got a whole shop full of people that none of them have graduated from college. But they work, they're putting their kids through school, and their kids will go to college because they've learned to work hard.
How well positioned is Ohio when it comes to the economic development landscape? Tax policy over in your neck of the woods, Andrew just came in, major military manufacturing, cutting edge stuff, AI, drone type of technology. Do you think that over the years, because I've talked about this a lot on the podcast, anytime we've had the Senate president on, but 10 years ago, there were 9 state income tax brackets in Ohio. Now there's just one. And anybody making less than $26,050 a year, or $26.50 or less, pays 0 state income tax. Where are we on economic development? It seems like we've come a long way, but is there more work to do?
Oh, there's a lot of work to do. And the fact of the matter is we have to promote Ohio to let people know this is the place to come. This is the place to bring your business. There's one of two people in Ohio. You're either working for a business or owning a business. We want the folks that own businesses to come here. We want folks to realize that if they want to get a job and work in some of the latest technology, my district has and I always get it wrong because it's the biggest title in the world, the Advanced Mobility Center of Excellence, where we're going to develop flying cars. This is where, I mean, we've always talked about it.
Meet George Jetson, right?
Yes, meet George Jetson. I always tell people in my district, Springfield, Ohio was the largest manufacturing company in the world, besides one town in Germany, back at the turn of the last century. And it was all because the national road went west.
US 40.
And it ended in Springfield because some president came in and said, that's a stupid idea. We're not funding this road. So everybody coming west had to stop in Springfield. Well, now we've got this Advanced Air Mobility Center of Excellence. It doesn't matter where the road ends because we're going to fly down the road. So there's so many things between Pat. Some of the things, I'm looking at my district in particular because that's what I know best, but the air park in Wilmington, the airport in Springfield, and Wright-Patt, between those three and the airspace that's been set, made in a certain way so that we can do out of line of sight flight with those machines that are being built. Those things make our area and Ohio, the Dayton area, stuff with Andrew, it's all going to be big.
You know, it's interesting when you start comparing and contrasting states. And just in the last few months, we've kind of seen the far left and the progressive left, the coastal left in California and other states sort of keep digging in on some of those 80-20 issues, and they always take the 20. But I actually had a chuckle a little bit. This was the statement from the chairman of Bed Bath & Beyond. The chairman of Bed Bath & Beyond, when they announced that they were not going to have any brick and mortar stores anymore in California. Marcus Lemonis said, "We will not open or operate retail stores in California. This decision isn't about politics, it's about reality. California has created one of the most overregulated, expensive, and risky environments for business in America. It's a system that makes it harder to employ people, harder to keep doors open, and harder to deliver value to customers. The result, higher taxes, higher fees, higher wages that many businesses simply serve California customers directly through bedbathandbeyond.com on our terms and with their best interests at heart." We gladly accept people from highly expensive, can't afford it any longer, can't live there, can't make enough money to work there. Come to the Midwest, come to Ohio, where the cost of living is fairly reasonable.
Right, and that's one of the great things about serving with President McCulley. Because when I work with him in the House, and now as he's come over to the Senate, and I followed him over here, he is one that is all about not only lowering taxes, but getting rid of the regulations, not creating new regulations, getting rid of 2 regulations for every new regulation we want to pass. Those are the things that make it advantageous for people to locate their businesses here. The bid, the fact that you can run an LLC and make up to $250,000 and not pay any tax on that, that is attractive to people who may not want to start a large business, but if they just want to run as simple as tree landscaping, say, I'm going to go into business. I'm willing to take it upon myself to employ myself. I'm going to buy a trailer, I'm going to buy a zero-turn mower, and I'm going to go out and start cutting grass, and I'm going to provide for me instead of relying on somebody else to provide a job for me. We want those people to succeed and come here and do that.
Yeah, the business income deduction was a major fight. I want to say a GA or maybe 2 GAs ago. 2 GAs.
We almost got rid of it.
Almost got rid of it. But it really did provide some equality and level the playing field for small businesses versus the major billion-dollar projects, the mega sites that come in. Would you agree?
And even we run a small incorporated manufacturer. We're not an LLC. We don't qualify for this. But in that sense, I want more people to begin to do what my father and my brothers and sisters did 50 some years ago, to go into business, to buy that first machine, to start doing something. They don't know how big it's going to be. My father never expected to have a machine shop that did what we do and employ 25 people. But the fact of the matter is, it's hard to do that today, and we want to make it easier and easier.
Well, I've often said that from our point of view, we believe it's your money first,
Right.
not the government's money.
Right.
And that's why when the political battle was happening, and if you cut all these marginal income tax brackets, how will the state possibly survive? And interestingly enough, we continue to run budget surpluses because you reduce the bureaucratic burden and the tax burden.
Sure.
That allows people to excel.
Right. We just need to get out of the way sometimes.
Right. What do you think about where we are on school funding? Because I continue to see these stories. There were a couple stories recently, one in the Columbus Dispatch, one on the NBC affiliate in Columbus, and it was about the $50 million in budget cuts that the City of Columbus schools were having to make in November. And remember, they just passed a big school levy, I want to say last year. But here's part of the story. According to the Ohio Education Association, public schools across the state face $2 billion in cuts over the next 2 years, forcing school boards to make difficult decisions about which programs and services to maintain. And I'm thinking, are we actually operating under the same set of facts here? Because I think to the left, facts don't really matter. Because in the last two General Assemblies, the General Assembly invested an additional $3 billion into school funding and the school funding formula, plus an additional almost $1 billion in this GA, notwithstanding the fact that there was a $10.1 billion cash carryover statewide of public schools. And if you do a little research, I'm just suggesting that maybe sometimes newsrooms, I know you're busy now, but if you do a little research, you would find that the 5-year cash carryover for this year, starting cash carryover balance for Columbus Public Schools, was $394 million. Next year forecast to be $327 million. And in 27, $223 million. But yet we don't have any money.
Right.
The narrative is more important than what the facts are.
Right. And I think a lot of times, and I know it's with the at the federal level, we talk about this a lot, that they expect, the government projects an increase of this much, and if we only increase them half that much, we've cut them 50%, or at least that's what is reported.
Reducing the amount of the increase is still an increase.
Yes.
Right?
Yes.
It's not a cut.
Yes. And I know we worked really hard to create the Fair School Funding Formula to try to come up with a constitutional way. It hasn't been challenged yet, so in my opinion, it's constitutional.
Well, it's been
now.
constitutional since the Ohio Supreme Court released the case back in '02.
Right.
So 23 years ago, because every single budget, right, has a different or a slightly different school funding formula. And until it's ruled otherwise, it's constitutional.
Right. But with that formula, I know school districts in my area were upset. We were giving them the maximum amount law would allow to increase funding, but because there was a cap, they would say we cut their funding. It's like, well, wait a minute. We didn't cut your funding. You just didn't get what the calculation would have given you because we gave you the maximum amount. And again, the report's now coming out showing the carryovers that some of these schools have. Not all of them, but a lot of them have, is the fact that they're storing up money. And that's not what that money's for. When we budget money for a coming GA, for another fiscal year, that's money for that year. It's not money for 10 years from now.
Well, there's a big difference between responsible budgeting and a slush fund. Right. So you can have, super savvy school board members and an on-point superintendent and finance director, and have a nice little carryover there in lieu of emergency or something happens or whatever it is, emergency repairs. But to have 2 times what your normal budget is, that's really not what the taxpayers had intended.
That's right.
Where do you stand on property taxes in Ohio? Because the General Assembly made some significant changes to the property tax structure.
That's correct.
One of which, several of which were vetoed. The House overrode the part of the property tax language that said no more emergency levies, no more replacement levies, and just to keep it simple, that's because those fall outside of that 20 mil floor, which was meant to be the anti-inflationary standard.
Right.
So we don't see what has been happening in the last couple of years. What do you think about property taxes in general, and did the GA take the right step in trying to bring this under control?
I think we took the right steps. I'm a little bit upset with the governor that he decided to veto many of them. And again, there's 30-some bills, I think, going through the Ohio House and Ohio Senate, and it's nibbling around the corners on this issue. Obviously, there's a ballot initiative out there, which, again, I'm one that started running on getting rid of property taxes. The fact is, though, that ballot initiative is half of an equation. It says get rid of them. It doesn't say how we're going to fund $19.5 billion, $20 billion worth of things. So that aside, the override of the emergency and renewal levies was extremely important. And I always tell people this: when I moved, I got good schools in my district, and they're working hard. Some of them can't pass new levies. They do the renewals. But I always, the reason I got involved in politics, I started talking about in 1997 or so, a school district I was living in showed pictures of leaking pipes and leaking ceiling, and this is an emergency levy. We need this emergency levy. It's only for 5 years, and that's key. It's only for 5 years. And we passed it. People vote for it. I can't tell you whether I voted for it or against it. I can't remember. But I do remember 5 years later them coming before the voters and saying, we need to renew the emergency levy.
Make it a permanent levy, right?
Well, no, just renew it.
Just renew it.
But it was one of those things of, I'm like, wait a minute. You told me there was an emergency. We gave you money for the emergency. You say the emergency is going on. What'd you do with that money? And the fact of the matter is, the key thing they always say, and this is the one issue that I'll have with the schools, is they say, if you renew this, it won't raise your taxes at all. And I'm like, wait a minute. You promised me a 5-year levy and it would end, and now you're renewing it and you're saying my taxes won't go up. I say that's like me going to a car dealership and saying, I would like to buy a $25,000 car. I'll pay $300 a month for it for 5 years, and then you'll give me the title. And when I pay that last payment, I go into the dealership and I say, where's my title? And they say, Kyle, we're going to let you keep paying for another. We know you need that car just as bad as you needed it 5 years ago. You told us an emergency then, you needed to replace a car. We'll let you, keep that car. You'll pay us another, 200 and something a month, but it won't raise your payments at all. And I'm like, no. The agreement was this. Now you've extended it. So I think the genesis behind that provision was to say, listen, you need to be honest with the voters. If you have an emergency, that's good. But this is a new levy. Your taxes would have gone down, and now they're going up. That confuses the voters the way it's done in the past. We need to make it more clear.
Yeah, it needs to be very clear, because when you start talking about mills, what's a mill?
Right.
It raises $1 for every $1,000 evaluation. And if you're like me, not that great at math, then you start thinking, and then what's a replacement versus a renewal levy versus an emergency levy? And that's how, over the last 40 years, the system was allowed to be gamed, and districts were able to keep, or even your local municipalities, because it's not just school levies.
Right.
We're talking about transportation, library levies, all those things, and local control is great.
Right.
But you don't want to wind up making the local taxpayers feel like that they're just being milked for everything that they have.
And the key thing in some of that is the things we're dealing with inflation right now is sometimes when you renew a levy or it's above that 20 mil floor, depending upon what the levy looks like, they get to capture all of that inflation that's happened over the past 5 years. It's not like they are still taxing you on what the value of your home was 10 years ago. I always use a couple examples, but I always say property tax, and the reason that I have issues with property taxes is if I take out a $65,000 loan and I go out and buy a Ford Bronco, I pay 7.5%, depending on what county I'm in, 7.5% sales tax on it. That's the last time the tax man ever bothers me about the purchase of that automobile. If you take $65,000 loan and go out and buy lumber, siding, shingles, windows, flooring, and put put an addition on your house all by yourself, at the time you get done, it's going to be worth about $100,000. You will pay the same sales tax on all of those things, just like I paid sales tax on my one purchase of a car. But for the next, forever, if you live in that home, the government comes along and says you need to pay us tax every year. And by the way, it's going to go up. As your Ford Bronco, it decreases in values. But that home only goes up, and you continue to pay property tax on it. And if you don't, we're going to come take it from you.
It's like you're renting from the government. I've heard some people say renting your home from the government even when it's paid off. But one thing that, certainly I think most people would find inexcusable is if you've been a teacher and you worked for 40 years and you retired, say in the late 1990s, now you're on a fixed income.
Right.
And when we had the special committee on housing year before last that went around the state of Ohio, there were some teachers that testified who had been retired for 15, 20 years and were scared to death that they would lose their home that's been paid for 30 plus years because they couldn't pay the property tax.
And you hit the key, the nail on the head. They're on a fixed income. I just spoke with the Springfield News-Sun yesterday about it. I took a copy of a printout from our auditor's office, and I said, here, this gentleman is 92. I know who he is. This is his home. He built it in 1961. I don't know what he built it for, but I know it wasn't very expensive because in 1961, an average home in Ohio was like $12,500. This was a nicer home, not very nice. It's just a split-level home, standard home. So it maybe cost $30,000. I don't know, but I know he's still there today, and he's owned it for many, many years. His property taxes just from 2010 to 15 went up $1,000 a year. He's paying $3,600 a year. He does get the homestead exemption, which is helpful, and we can talk about that. Yeah. But the fact of the matter is, he never thought he's paying more now in property taxes than he ever paid on that loan to build that home in 1961.
Yeah.
So, and again, you can't budget for that, and it's only going to go up. I've never had my property taxes go down. They've always gone
What? They've never gone down? What a shock.
Because the value of my home always goes up.
Well, yeah, and that's what you want. I mean, and to an extent, I mean, you want good schools as well, but not at the expense of retired people. And you talked about the homestead exemption. There have been some changes proposed to that, but it's a matter of trying to get everybody on the same page, including the executive branch.
Right. And the fact of the matter is, and the thing I didn't understand probably until about 2 years ago, was the homestead exemption isn't just... This gentleman had a $500 deduction in his property taxes because of the homestead exemption. It's fantastic. I'm glad he's got that. But the state of Ohio makes up that money. It's not like the schools got a $500 reduction. The gentleman did, and you and I, taxpayers, make up for that in sales tax and income tax. So it's not like they just got free money. That somebody has to pay that bill because those voters in that school district or that town for roads and fire, they voted for those. We can't override what somebody at the local level decides to tax themselves.
Yeah, property taxes are local issues.
Right.
The state backfills, for lack of a better word, reimburses local governments for things like the homestead exemption.
And that's not to say that when we come to school funding, the state of Ohio has decided, you tell us what you think you can afford, what your capacity is for your school district, whether it's an urban school somewhere or a suburban rural school. You tell us what you can pay, we'll make up the rest, or we'll determine what you can pay, not tell us what. We'll determine what you can pay, we'll make up the rest. That's different than the property taxes you're voting on in your district.
Very true. State Senator Kyle Koehler, Republican from Springfield, Ohio in the 10th District. Thanks for your insight and perspective. Really appreciate your time.
Thank you, John. Appreciate it.
Thanks for tuning in, and we'll see you soon.